Dad's silent revenge.
2 weeks after my daughter Beverly's wedding, I was reviewing security footage from my construction supply warehouse when I saw something that made my coffee cup slip right out of my hands. There on the screen, clear as daylight, was my daughter in her wedding dress, locked in a passionate embrace with Richard Lawson, the married CEO of the tech company where she works. The timestamp showed 2017 p.m. minus exactly 2 hours before she walked down the aisle to marry Victor. Let me back up. I'm Eugene Richardson, 58 years old, and I've spent the last 40 years building Richardson Construction Supply from nothing into one of Phoenix's most respected businesses. Started as a high school kid loading trucks for $3.50 cent or an hour back in 1983, worked my way up through every department: warehouse, sales, purchasing, operations. When old Mr. Patterson was ready to retire in 1995, he offered to sell me the business. Took every penny I had saved plus a loan that kept me awake nights for 3 years, but I made it work. Now we've got 3 warehouses across the valley, 45 employees who've been with me an average of 8 years, and contracts with half the major builders in Arizona. We supply everything from rebar to roofing materials, and our reputation is built on one simple principle. When Eugene Richardson shakes your hand, that's your contract. No games, no surprises, no small print that screws you over later. I raised Beverly and her younger sister Nancy after their mother Linda passed from cancer 8 years ago. Linda was the organized one, the one who kept track of parent-teacher conferences and reminded the girls to call their grandmother on Sundays. When she died, I thought I could handle raising 2 college-aged daughters on my own. Figured I'd done okay with business. How hard could family be? Turns out, harder than negotiating with concrete suppliers during a materials shortage. Beverly was always my star. Graduated from Arizona State with a marketing degree, landed a good job at Pinnacle Tech Solutions, bought herself a nice BMW, rented a modern apartment in Tempe. Independent, successful, everything a father wants for his daughter. Nancy, on the other hand, had been finding herself for the last 5 years. She tried teaching, real estate, graphic design, and something called lifestyle coaching that mostly involved posting motivational quotes on Instagram. When Nancy's divorce was finalized 3 years ago, she asked if she could stay in my guest house just temporarily while she got back on her feet. Her boyfriend Gerald moved in 6 months later. Temporary had stretched into 3 years now. No rent, no end date, just constant requests for money and Gerald acting like he owned the place. But Beverly was different. Beverly was the success story. Until that Tuesday morning when security footage showed me exactly what kind of success she'd really achieved. The wedding had cost me $67,000. Beverly insisted on the Phoenician resort for the reception, the Desert Botanical Garden for the ceremony, a photographer from Los Angeles, and a band that had played at some celebrity wedding in Malibu. "Daddy, this is my special day," she'd said with that smile that reminded me so much of her mother. I want it to be perfect. 200 guests, mostly my business associates, longtime friends who'd watched Beverly grow up, and Linda's family from back east. The gift table had been overflowing with envelopes. I remember standing there during the reception, watching Beverly dance with Victor, thinking I'd never been prouder. My eldest daughter, radiant in her $4,000 dress, married to a good man who clearly adored her. Victor Martinez was everything I'd hoped for in a son-in-law. Software engineer, steady job, treated Beverly like a queen. He'd asked my permission before proposing old-fashioned style, sitting in my office on a Saturday morning looking nervous as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. "Mr. Richardson, I love your daughter more than life itself. I promise I'll take care of her." I'd shaken his hand and told him to call me Eugene. Now I was staring at that handshake moment, wondering how I'd missed the signs that my daughter was playing all of us. I sat in my office that Tuesday morning, the security footage frozen on my computer screen. Beverly's arms wrapped around Lawson's neck, her wedding dress bunched up against the brick wall of warehouse number 2, my warehouse. She'd used my own property for her affair just hours before promising to love and honor another man. The office door was locked, but my hands were shaking as I rewound the footage and watched it again. 2:15 p.m. minus they arrived together in separate cars. 2:17 p.m. minus the kiss I'd already seen. Urgent and familiar, nothing hesitant about it. 2:23 p.m., they disappeared inside through the employee entrance. I had the access codes, so Beverly could get in anytime she wanted. I'd given her those codes years ago for emergencies, never thinking she'd use them for this. 2:51 p.m., they emerged, Beverly adjusting her dress while Lawson checked his phone like a man with places to be. 2:53 p.m., they left separately, Beverly heading toward the Botanical Gardens 36 minutes. She'd spent 36 minutes with her lover in my warehouse 2 hours before marrying Victor. Then she'd driven straight to her wedding ceremony and looked Victor in the eyes while promising to forsake all others. I printed screenshots, saved the digital files to a secure drive, and tried to think rationally. There had to be an explanation. Beverly was my firstborn, my pride. This couldn't be what it looked like, but even as I told myself that, I was already pulling up more footage from different camera angles. Warehouse 2 had 4 security cameras, and they'd captured everything. The detail was crystal clear. Beverly arriving first, checking her phone, looking around nervously. Lawson pulling up 2 minutes later in his black Tesla, parking where the cameras couldn't see his license plate. Smart, he knew exactly where those cameras were positioned, which meant this wasn't their first time using my property for their meetings. I called my IT specialist, Danny Torres. He'd been handling our computer systems for 6 years, ever since we upgraded from the old paper filing system. Good kid, recent ASU graduate, new technology like I knew concrete mix ratios. Danny, I need you here now. Security footage analysis. And Danny, keep this between us. He arrived within 30 minutes, took one look at the footage, and whistled low under his breath. Mr. Richardson, you want me to enhance this? Pull metadata? Everything. Timestamps, GPS coordinates, file authenticity. I need it bulletproof. Danny worked for 2 hours, pulling technical data I barely understood, but knew I'd need later. Digital fingerprints, file verification, camera angle analysis. When he finished, he handed me a flash drive and a folder of printed technical specifications. It's all authentic, Mr. Richardson. Timestamps match the camera logs. GPS data confirms location. File headers show no tampering. This would hold up in any court. After Danny left, I sat alone in my office, staring at the evidence spread across my desk. My daughter, 2 hours before her wedding in my warehouse, with a married man whose wife had attended the ceremony and shaken my hand during the receiving line. The phone rang around 11 a.m. Daddy. Beverly's voice was bright, cheerful, the same tone she'd used since childhood when she wanted something. Victor and I are house hunting in Scottsdale. We found this amazing place, 4 bedrooms, pool, mountain views. The seller wants to move fast though. I listened to her describe granite countertops and travertine floors while staring at security footage of her betraying her husband before he was even her husband. We need help with the down payment. Just $40,000. You understand, right? After everything you spent on the wedding, this is just completing the picture. $40,000 delivered like she was asking to borrow my truck for the weekend. Let me think about it, sweetheart. Think about it, Daddy. This is important. Victor and I need to move fast in this market. The house won't wait forever. I hung up without answering and made a decision I'd never made before in my life. I followed my daughter. Left the office at 4:30 p.m., drove to her apartment complex in Tempe and waited. Beverly's silver BMW was parked in her assigned spot. At 5:30 p.m., she emerged wearing a red dress I'd never seen before, got in her car, and drove straight to the Ritz-Carlton downtown. I followed at a distance, feeling like some kind of private detective in a bad movie. She met Lawson at the hotel bar. I watched from the lobby, sitting behind a pillar with a newspaper I wasn't reading, while my daughter laughed and touched the arm of a man who wasn't her husband of 2 weeks. They sat close, intimate, her hand covering his on the small table between them. She was still wearing her wedding ring. I drove home to Paradise Valley in a daze, my mind cycling between disbelief and growing anger. The house looked the same as always, 4 bedrooms, desert landscaping, the pool Linda had insisted on but barely lived to enjoy. Nancy's car was in the driveway along with Gerald's beat-up Honda Civic with the dented bumper and missing hubcap. Inside, Gerald was sprawled across my leather recliner, beer in hand, watching ESPN on my 65-inch TV. He glanced up when I walked in, barely acknowledged my presence. "Hey, Eugene, grab me another beer while you're up." I stood in my own entryway, security footage fresh in my mind, watching a man who'd never paid a dime of rent order me around in my own house. "Get your own beer, Gerald." He looked up, genuinely surprised. "What's eating you?" Nancy appeared from the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, laughing loudly at something the caller was saying. She gave me a dismissive wave and continued her conversation, something about a spa weekend in Sedona and needing money for treatments. "Daddy always comes through," I heard her say as she disappeared upstairs. I went to my home office and closed the door. The security images were still in my briefcase. Beverly kissing Lawson, the metadata Danny had pulled. The timestamps that proved my daughter had been with another man just hours before making vows to Victor. I thought about Beverly's phone call, the casual demand for $40,000, the assumption that my wallet was permanently open for whatever she wanted. I thought about Gerald's beer order, Nancy's spa weekend, 3 years of supporting 2 adults who treated my home like a free hotel, but mostly I thought about Victor. Good, honest Victor who'd asked permission to marry my daughter, who'd looked me in the eye and promised to love her forever. Victor who had no idea his wife had been cheating on him before they'd even exchanged rings. Wednesday morning, I did something I'd never done in 40 years of business. I called in sick and spent the day researching private investigators and lawyers. By evening, I had appointments scheduled with Arthur Coleman, the best real estate attorney in Phoenix, and a private investigation firm that specialized in matrimonial fraud cases. But first, I needed to know exactly how deep this deception went. Thursday evening, Nancy knocked on my office door. I'd been sitting there for 2 hours, staring at my computer screen, researching forensic accountants and matrimonial investigators, the kind of professionals I'd never imagined needing in my personal life. "Daddy, can we talk?" Nancy's voice had that sweet tone she used when she wanted money. "Gerald and I have been thinking about our future." I looked up at my youngest daughter, 29 years old, college degree in communications that she'd never really used, living in my guest house for 3 years without contributing a dime to utilities, groceries, or maintenance. "Gerald has this amazing opportunity," she continued, settling into the chair across from my desk without being invited. "Food truck business. Phoenix is perfect for it. All those construction sites, office complexes, events. We've done the research, Daddy. We just need startup capital. How much?" $35,000. I know it sounds like a lot, but you'd be a partner. You'd see returns within the first year, guaranteed. I studied Nancy's face, looking for signs of the manipulation I was beginning to recognize. The way she leaned forward, earnest and excited. The way she said guaranteed, like she was doing me a favor by taking my money. "And where would you operate this food truck?" "Well, Gerald knows the permitting process. We'd start with the downtown business district, maybe some of your construction sites if you could help us get permits." My construction sites, where my crews worked 10-hour days in the Arizona heat, where I'd built relationships with contractors over decades of honest dealing. She wanted to use my reputation, my connections, my money to fund a scheme that would probably fail within 6 months. "No, Nancy." Her face changed, confusion replacing the practiced enthusiasm. "What do you mean no?" "I mean no. Find jobs, pay rent, grow up. Daddy, this is our chance to build something together. Family business. Family business requires family to actually work, Nancy. When's the last time you had a job that lasted more than 6 months?" She stood up, tears starting on cue. "I can't believe you're being so cruel. Gerald and I are trying to build a future in my guest house with my money, using my business connections. That's not building a future. That's extending childhood indefinitely." She stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Through the ceiling, I heard her stomping upstairs. Then Gerald's voice, then the sound of their argument carrying down through the house. I turned back to my computer and continued my research. By midnight, I had a list of 3 private investigation firms and 2 forensic accounting services. I also had something else, a growing suspicion that Beverly's wedding fraud might be more sophisticated than just an affair and a divorce plan. Friday morning at Arthur Coleman's office felt like stepping into a different world. 23rd floor of the Camelback Esplanade, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the valley, law books lining the walls like expensive wallpaper. Arthur had handled commercial real estate deals for me over the years, but this was different territory. "Eugene," he said, settling behind his mahogany desk, "you sounded troubled on the phone. What's happening?" I spread the security footage printouts across his desk, explained about Beverly's affair, the request for $40,000, Nancy and Gerald's freeloading. Arthur studied the images, made notes on a legal pad, asked detailed questions about timelines and financial arrangements. "Eugene, this could be more than just adultery. If Beverly married Victor under false pretenses, if she was planning divorce from the beginning to collect assets, that's fraud. The wedding gifts alone would constitute theft by deception. What are my options? First, we protect your assets immediately. Irrevocable trust, everything locked down tight. Second, we investigate thoroughly. If this is fraud, we need evidence that will stand up in criminal court, not just civil proceedings." Arthur pulled out a card. "Margaret Reeves, best matrimonial investigator in Arizona. Former FBI, white-collar crimes, now private practice. If your daughter is running a con, Margaret will find it." I called Margaret from Arthur's office, professional voice, direct questions, no wasted words. She could meet me Tuesday morning, needed a $5,000 retainer, estimated 6 to 8 weeks for a complete investigation. "Mr. Richardson," she said, "if your daughter is sophisticated enough to coordinate wedding fraud, there will be digital evidence. Shell companies, hidden accounts, communication records. My team specializes in following money trails. I wrote the check that afternoon. Own $8,500 to Arthur for asset protection and legal coordination. $5,000 to Margaret for the investigation. $13,000 to protect myself from my own children. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done since Linda died. I drove up to Flagstaff and spent 2 days at our old cabin. The place where we'd taken family vacations when the girls were young. where Beverly had learned to fish in Oak Creek and Nancy had collected smooth stones she insisted were magical. The cabin was exactly as we'd left it. Same mismatched furniture, same faded family photos on the mantel, same view of the ponderosa pines that Linda had loved. I sat on the deck Saturday evening, drinking a beer and trying to remember when my daughters had stopped being the children in those photos and started being the women who saw me as nothing more than a source of funding. Sunday morning, I made a decision. I called Beverly, "Daddy, I was just thinking about you. Did you consider our house situation? We really need to know about the down payment, Beverly. I want to talk to you and Victor together. Family dinner Sunday night next week? You, Victor, Nancy, Gerald? Important family business. What kind of business? You're being mysterious. Just be there. 6 p.m. and Beverly, bring your appetite. I'm planning quite a feast." I hung up and drove back to Phoenix, stopping at an Office Depot in Flagstaff to buy a large manila envelope and a digital printer. By Tuesday, Margaret Reeves would start her investigation. In 1 week, I'd have my family dinner. And sometime between now and then, I'd discover exactly how deep the deception went and who else was involved in betraying the man who'd given them everything. Margaret Reeves delivered her preliminary report 6 weeks later. What we found was worse than I'd imagined and more sophisticated than anything I'd given Beverly credit for planning. She'd opened a shell company 3 months before the wedding, BRM Consulting LLC. All wedding gifts, every check and cash envelope from that overflowing table had been deposited into the company account, not into any joint account with Victor. The business registration listed Beverly as sole owner with an address that turned out to be a UPS mailbox in Scottsdale. "Your daughter has been planning this for at least 6 months," Margaret explained, spreading financial documents across the conference table at Arthur's office. Shell company formation, consultation with a divorce attorney, even research into Arizona's community property laws. This wasn't a crime of passion, Mr. Richardson. This was premeditated fraud. The text messages were the worst part. Beverly's phone records showed months of communication with Janet Morrison, a divorce attorney who specialized in high-asset dissolution. The strategy was clear. Collect maximum wedding gifts, file for divorce after 6 months claiming domestic violence, and walk away with everything while Victor faced false abuse allegations that would destroy his reputation and career. She even purchased a small camera, Margaret continued, marketed for documenting domestic incidents. The receipts show she bought it 2 weeks after the wedding. Victor was completely innocent. The investigation showed no knowledge of Beverly's plans, no involvement in the financial schemes, no awareness that his wife was setting him up for destruction. Margaret's team had interviewed his co-workers, checked his financial records, even conducted surveillance. He was exactly what he appeared to be, minus a decent man who'd fallen for the wrong woman. "There's more," Margaret said, pulling out another folder. "Your younger daughter, Nancy, has been telling friends and family that she's staying at your house to care for her grieving father. She's been using your wife's death to justify freeloading, claiming you need emotional support. The recordings were devastating. Nancy on the phone with her cousin in Tucson, laughing about how easy it was to manipulate poor daddy who was so lost without mom. Gerald bragging to his buddies at some bar about living rent-free in Paradise Valley because the old man feels sorry for us. 3 years of lies, manipulation, and exploitation. My own daughters treating me like a mark in a long con. The legal documentation was extensive. Arthur had prepared criminal complaints for fraud, theft by deception, and conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming. Digital records, financial trails, recorded conversations, witness statements. Beverly would face felony charges. Nancy and Gerald would be evicted and potentially charged with fraud if they'd claimed me as a dependent on any government forms. Sunday evening arrived gray and cool, October weather settling over Phoenix. I set the dining room table myself, good china that Linda had chosen years ago. Cloth napkins, candles, the works. At my place, I put the manila folder containing 63 pages of investigation results, financial records, legal documents, and photographs. They arrived within 15 minutes of each other. Beverly and Victor first, looking relaxed and happy. Beverly kissed my cheek and complimented the table setting. Victor shook my hand and asked if I needed help with anything, playing the perfect devoted couple. Nancy and Gerald came in arguing about something. Gerald complaining that his job interview had been a waste of time, and Nancy defending some online course she'd signed up for using money I'd given her for groceries. We sat down to roast chicken and vegetables. I'd prepared everything myself, wanting this meal to be completely under my control. Small talk for the first 15 minutes, Victor's latest software project, Gerald's continuing job search, Nancy's new interest in life coaching certification. Then I opened the folder. Before we continue, there's something everyone needs to see. I slid the first photograph across the table to Beverly. Security camera footage, timestamp clearly visible, October 12th, 2:17 p.m. Her face went completely white. "Daddy, where did you get this?" "My warehouse security system." 2 hours before your wedding ceremony. Victor picked up the photo, studied it for a long moment, then looked at his wife. "Beverly, what is this?" I continued laying out documents methodically, bank records showing BRM Consulting LLC, text messages between Beverly and her divorce attorney, financial analysis showing that every wedding gift had been diverted to the shell company, purchase receipts for the documentation camera. "Victor, my investigation shows you're completely innocent in this. Beverly has been planning to divorce you since before the wedding. The marriage was a financial fraud designed to collect gifts and destroy your reputation with false abuse claims." Beverly stood up so fast her chair fell backward. "This is insane. You hired investigators to spy on your own daughter?" "Nancy Gerald," I continued, ignoring her outburst. "You've lived in my house for 3 years without paying rent while telling people you're caring for me. My investigator has recordings of you laughing about manipulating your poor daddy." Gerald started to stand, face reddening. "You can't just throw us out. We have rights." I reached into the folder and pulled out legal documents. Eviction notices, 30 days. And Beverly, criminal complaints have been filed with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. Fraud, theft by deception, conspiracy. "You should expect a visit from detectives this week." The room erupted, Beverly screaming about family betrayal and threatening to sue me for invasion of privacy. Gerald cursing and accusing me of destroying his future. Nancy crying that I was tearing the family apart over misunderstandings. Victor sat silently, staring at the evidence spread across Linda's good china, his face cycling through confusion, hurt, and growing anger. "Dad," Nancy tried the emotional approach through her tears. "We can work this out. We're family. Family forgives." I stood up and pushed my chair back. "Family doesn't steal from each other, Nancy. Family doesn't lie and manipulate and exploit each other. You stopped being family when you decided I was nothing more than a bank account with emotions you could manipulate." I walked to my office and closed the door. Behind me, chaos continued for another 20 minutes, shouting, accusations, Beverly's desperate attempts to convince Victor that somehow the evidence was fake or misunderstood. Finally, I heard cars leaving. First Beverly's BMW, then Gerald's Honda. The house fell silent for the first time in years. 3 months later, the legal aftermath was complete. Beverly pled guilty to reduced charges and agreed to full restitution of the wedding gifts. She moved to California to start over. Nancy and Gerald found jobs in a cheap apartment across town. Victor's marriage was annulled, and he kept his job and reputation intact. I changed the locks, updated my will, and discovered something remarkable. My house was quiet again, peaceful. For the first time since Linda died, I could live on my own terms. The security cameras are still running, but these days they mostly record the quiet life of a man who learned the difference between being loved and being used. Family isn't about blood, it's about respect, honesty, and genuine care for each other's well-being. I'm 58 years old, and I finally understand that it's never too late to demand the respect you deserve, even from family, especially from family. Best lesson I ever learned. The hardest lesson I learned wasn't that my daughters could betray me, it was that I had taught them it was acceptable by never setting boundaries when it mattered. Real family love isn't about endless forgiveness for bad behavior. It's about respecting each other enough to expect better and holding people accountable when they fall short.